Um, so yeah, we have a couple of different topics to cover today. Um, and I just want to open the floor to any announcements. At this time, I will share one for clean. Last week, I think it kind of got lost in the excitement about the climate literacy principles, but last week we announced the um, next round of working groups for the Excel Summit. So if anyone has any interest in leading a new working group, um, please feel free to propose one. I will share the link to that in the chat here, so you can take a look at what's required. But if you have any questions, I'm definitely the person to reach out to about that. Um, and we're hoping to have all of the proposals in by next Friday. Um, but if you need more time to let me know. So I'll share the link to that. Excel's call for proposals is out. I think that's it for clean right now. Announcements from anyone else?
Um, yeah, actually, I do have an announcement, and we're having a presentation on our Florida Climate Educators Network monthly meeting next week, next Tuesday, the 22nd in the evening, by someone from the Environmental Defense Fund and Ali Desard. They've got a online tool that they use to identify possible risks in Florida for, flooding and heat and this and that, different kinds of maps. It's kind of a tool to be using in the classroom. So we're going to show that. And so I'll drop a little flyer in the chat room here. And if anybody wants to attend and see what they put together, that would be great. And so thanks.
Great. Thanks for sharing the link. Any other announcements? Thoughts? Concerns? Okay, cool. Um, yeah, so I know we just had a few more people join, but before I had started the recording, I was just saying that Scott had proposed a question for discussion last week. We ended up talking about the climate literacy principles, but he had proposed a question about climate literacy in Florida. So I was thinking we could dedicate the first bit of time here to that. I don't know if Scott, you're ready to launch into that, or if you need another minute.
Yeah, I know. I just added the flyer to the chat room here, but could you, I don't know if I can share. Can I share a screen or two? A couple
You
of
should be able
things,
to
I
share
guess.
a screen.
Okay, very good. I
Yeah.
just to give everybody a little bit of a context, and I have a question that I wanted to check with this group in particular about. Next week or in a few weeks, I've got a presentation actually to sort of facilitate a conversation around climate education uh, at a mini conference here in Florida for the LEAF, the League of Environmental Educators of Florida group. So just to see where people are with respect to, a group like that with respect to climate education and sort of encouraging them to do more, that sort of thing. And in preparing sort of the slides for that, I wanted to sort of set the stage a little bit until, of course, we're just finishing these two hurricanes here. So hopefully people are making some connections about the possibility that, these things could be connected to climate change issues and what that means. Although, of course, our governor DeSantis just sort of made a statement. Well, this is nothing new under the sun here about these hurricanes. We always have hurricanes in Florida, so how could that possibly be connected to anything with climate change? Basically, he's saying. So it's kind of amazing. But Anyway, I do have a question and I wanted to get some feedback. So let me, if I can, I'll show these. I'll find a couple of slides here to show everybody, just to set the stage and though with this group in particular, I'm sure you guys are all aware, and probably the group I'm going to talk to, since they're environmental educators, are going to be very aware of some of the impacts of climate change, like sea level rise and ocean acidification, and more heat in Florida. That's sort of really been identified by scientists as connected to climate change. And then others, we're talking about more, the rapid intensification is under, it's under study now. I don't know if we've gotten the scientific community has endorsed this. Well, there's still some questions about it, I think, and also how much the flooding some of the flooding we've been getting is related to climate change, may or, how much of that is due to climate change, and who knows what kind of local variations there might be. So a little bit, some questions there, I think, fair enough. I mean, I think we can sort of keep an open mind about it, maybe do some studying. My question sort of, and then, sort of pointing to people, well, we have these anthropogenic impacts on climate change that scientists identified, particularly with respect to fossil fuel use. So as teachers, sort of, here's my question. One of my questions for them is a discussion question, given the current climate change impacts and what may lie ahead of the future for Florida, what are our obligations for teaching students about climate change? And, I mean, I think if you gave this to many teachers in Florida, they probably would express some fear about repercussions for presenting here one way or the other. I don't know if they're administrator or what, but they might express some fear in the classroom. And be that as it may, sort of what are our obligations for doing that? And I don't know if I necessarily have to review that with this group, but I guess in doing some research on this, I found an interesting bit in the administrative code for a professional conduct requirement. I wanted to run this by you basically and get your thoughts about whether you think climate change education might fit under this. So here you see this administrative code about what Florida educators must do. And then I, put it in bold here, their obligations to student requires that the individual, the teacher, make reasonable effort to protect the student from conditions harmful to learning and or to the student's mental and or physical health and or safety. Now, when I read that, I just, it strikes me that, that uh, there's an argument to be made that if you're teaching climate education, you would want to, that's a good rash place for saying, yeah, I'm obligated to teach climate change about climate change to my students because of this stuff written in the administrative code. Does that make sense? Or what do you think any objections might be to something, to using that kind of thing?
I think it makes sense, but I also think that some will object that you're harming them by exposing them to scary stuff, which I think is, to be crude, bullshit. Because I think many students will see through denial about climate change. So I think there's a solid argument to be made that this is protecting both their physical and mental health by preparing them for the realities that we're already facing that are likely to worsen in the coming decades, almost certain to worsen.
Any other thoughts, Ingrid? I see you nodding your head in agreement with that rationale. Or do you think, and anybody of the sort of thinking in terms of denial or other ways? I mean, Don mentioned a good argument that maybe you cause more harm than good, depending on the way you say it.
I actually think if you're using some of the arguments that like the APA is using about the statistics around young people and anxiety, and the majority of that anxiety coming from climate change, I think it swings the other way when you look at the statistics and the studies that they're doing. But I mean, I think you could make a really strong argument. And it all depends on whether they want to look at the science or not, which clearly there's the question.
To add to that too, I think that the students would have very specifically hurricane anxiety that you could
Mhm.
really try to measure or even quantify before you start to engage them with climate science and use climate science as a way to help them deal with that anxiety and also give them agency to do something, which we know reduces that anxiety tremendously.
Good point. I mean, the other thing that occurs to me when you talk about this with people is that some of the legal things that people have done, like the what's the lawsuit that the young people brought against the U.S. government to ensure their life, you know, um, this might say that if people aren't doing this in their classroom, they could turn around and sue them in federal court or something or I don't know, but Florida court for not doing this. I suppose that's the outcome. And then if the argument is made, maybe the legislature in Florida then would try to take this language out at some point if they think it's going to be a problem. I don't know. I wouldn't put anything past this legislature that we've got here now, but anyway. Well, any other comments on that or other arguments that it might be a problem for some reason on asking teachers to be obligated to do something about climate change in their classrooms?
I think if you're going
This
with
is-
anxiety argument, you should definitely read or read up on the Anxious Generation book. I can't think of the author right now, but again, it's this phone-based childhood as opposed to play-based, but it starts to, I think it will layer into what you're talking about. Would be interesting to look at.
This is Frank at NOAA. Just dialing in. Sorry for being a little bit late, but one of the interesting things that's shown up in my work is while we've been trying to improve classroom-based climate instruction for a really long time, and the formal education system is an incredibly hard, diverse system to change, for everyone. And one of the, in the near term, that doesn't only have to happen in the formal classroom. And so there's an opening for a really great educational intervention that is not first and only through the classroom. Not it's just such a hard thing to do for every classroom everywhere that other interventions that are available, skillfully available, digitally available maybe, or through museums, zoos, aquaria, other venues where that learning can happen. But I think as we think about like climate literacy for the next 10 years and improving it, I think we have to figure out other ways of improving it other than just the classroom. It's not going to meet the need that is in the classroom today or for the students today. So I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how we design it, but I think we have to identify some alternative strategies to complement, especially for places where teachers are just sometimes doing harm, or their absence of doing anything is also a form of harm. But that's not going to change tomorrow.
Yeah, Frank, thank you for that point. That's a good point. I mean, one of the things that I'm going to share, which I didn't show here, is that there are folks in our schools and some of the people like Carolyn, who's on this call from time to time, they do these after school clubs and things that actually they get more into some of the climate change at that point rather than in the classroom setting. And some of the providers like Clio that Carolyn, you know, where Carolyn is involved, they come in after school and do these things and organize them. So there is some of that going on in Florida schools, but I think you're right. I mean, there some of those alternatives may be some of the ways that we can help students and maybe even the teachers to, you know, make
Yep.
sure that they get some of that climate work and understanding and action.
Yeah, many of you have heard me say something along these lines before, but I think, you know, in general, when there's anxiety or depression, the best treatment for that is to get to work on the problem that causes the anxiety or depression, and to ideally do that in community with others. And I think that that's, I guess, at the heart of my argument for alleviating climate anxiety.
But you
Well,
know, Don,
sorry,
well,
go
one of
ahead.
the, yeah, sorry, just, but Don, one of the interesting things about what you just said, which I completely support, is, you know, where's action that is accessible to me, regardless of where I am in the country, at what level, and then also who are the people who are working on it already that I can connect to. So there's a lot of, I guess, landscaping that we could do for young people as they can find and connect, and then connect to action efforts that are at so many scales now. But you know, it's really, if you don't know what you're doing, it's kind of hard to find it. But it is findable. But I think we could do a better job of kind of creating maps to those places. I'm thinking of like Gen Thrive and what they've been doing out of EcoRise, or Andra out of 10 Strands just showed me some really interesting GIS work on this that they did for California that is very replicable. But you know, lifting it up and connecting it to the, you know, students and educators is work in front of us, but it's not like we have to start from scratch here.
Well, let me ask you, Frank, you reminded me, I was just thinking when you were talking a little bit about opportunities for students outside the classroom or some of these projects, it sounds a little like I've seen the citizen science website where they connect citizens to, I mean, to different science projects that you can do and actually gather the data. I don't know if there's any of those projects that you were talking about where nationally students can plug into some kind of climate work and actually gather data, or doesn't necessarily have to be a science project, I suppose, but you know,
Right.
some other kinds of work that they can do to be involved in some, I mean, it could be political, it could be, you know, could be art, could be literature, those kinds of things where people could participate in some kind of climate change work.
So yeah, but I think what yes, but I think that the action word is what's key here. Um, the science is pretty good. I mean, there's definitely some gaps in science, but I'll give you an example. One of my colleagues' wife at NOAA has a shop in the arts district in Asheville. And they were standing in it before the flood crested, and they were like, well, what does 23 feet cresting look like here inside of this space? And they had no idea. And he works for NOAA, and he misjudged by like 10 feet, and it destroyed their shop because what they did or didn't do, because there was nothing in the neighborhood that actually showed what 23 feet on the building would look like relative to the stream or the river. So, you know, sometimes it's like, actually, if you just put signs up that, you know, you carefully got the surveying right, you could have, we know how to make an informed decision. But sometimes it's practical. But I think what I took away from it was it's an action project. It gives communities actionable information, helps with the climate action plans of the county or the city or the state, whatever. But it's totally doable by the community. But it's different than like citizen science or community science. It's a different, and I have not seen enough of this yet, but it feels like it's emerging. And I think that going there deeper and more is definitely accessible by young people and their educators, but also really helps communities make better decisions given the challenges that we face.
So just to use your example, are you saying that, well, I don't know if they couldn't anticipate that big of a flood, but let's say
They could. They could.
they
They
could.
absolutely could.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
no, with it, they knew. I mean, if you go to the climate action plan of I can't remember the name of the county, they were talking about this, but it's the connecting data and projections and risk into human scale in ways that can actually, you know, there've been countries called put a blue line on the top on walls and, you know, posts, and just to give a sense of like flooding levels have been this high. So you're like, oh wow, snap! That actually makes it much more accessible than you have to go to that website and look at that thing, and then maybe you see this thing, and it just isn't connecting. I don't know if that helps.
Ingrid's got her hand up.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the statement on the screen here about a educator making reasonable effort to protect the students from conditions that are harmful for learning. And I was trying to think of examples that are harmful for learning. And so I came up with things like bullying, right? If a child is being bullied, it would be hard for them to learn. Or if a child is hungry, it'd be hard for them to learn. And I think with climate change, an obvious one is if a school building is damaged or destroyed, it's hard for students to learn. And that could, you know, certainly come from this kind of extreme storm that climate change is bringing. So that might be an argument for certainly teaching about climate change adaptation and how do we stay safe and prepare for the more extreme weather that we're getting and that's going to continue.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. I mean, I think I talked to Carolyn a little bit about this, I think. And she said she's, you know, before, I think even before Helene was up there, and she was sort of saying that, you know, well, she's got just thinking about how to deal with emergencies right now. And yeah, that's a teachable moment when you can prepare people for emergencies. You know, what do you do to talk about planning with your students there? How do you prepare for an emergency in your school, in your home? You know, and sort of provide that kind of information is a very basic level. Never even, you know, not even getting into much about climate change. If you've got a hurricane, it's a day out for you, but how do you get ready and how do you protect yourself and your family and your pets and that sort of thing could be a basic part of that as well. Well, thanks, everybody. I think I appreciate the talk and giving me some additional things to think about with this group, and we'll see how this goes. And I'll give you a feedback in a few weeks about what people said, that if we get anybody that thought this was worth pursuing.
Thanks, Scott. I don't know if you saw them, but there were a couple of items in the chat
Oh,
too.
I didn't see that. Okay.
Yeah.
Here, I'm gonna stop
with some
sharing.
resources.
Oh, good. I'll take a look. Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, any other thoughts about this before we move on to the next topic? Okay. It's a good discussion. Great. Well, Dawn, do you want to share about your exciting news?
Sure, sure. And I think I'll do that
And
by,
Ingrid.
yes. I think we'll do that by just sharing the announcement slideshow from GSA. Maybe. There we go. I think. Presenting from Canva, which I have only done once before, so hopefully I won't screw it up. All right, so sort of setting the stage for this is asking a couple of questions. Do you know someone who was approximately a high school freshman? That's someone born in about 2010. So if you do, raise your hand, play along with me. Got a couple there. Do you know someone who was born in the 2020s? That is someone who is 4 years old or younger. Okay. So a child born today will turn 76 in 2100. A current high school freshman will turn 90 in 2100. I come from some fairly durable stock in my family. One pair of grandparents lived to 97 and 99, and their oldest daughter is still going strong at 97. And of course, I think all of us probably know somebody who's 76 or older. So that indicates that we all know someone and probably love someone who will be alive in the next century. And I think that's a good way of bringing home the point that it's not that far away, and also brings home the point that we must vastly and rapidly improve climate change education. And so we at the Paleontological Research Institution, that includes Ingrid and myself on the call today, and her other members of our climate team are listed there, Alex Moore and Rob Ross. And the four of us have been working together for a very long time. And what we're doing with the Center for Climate Change Education is not hugely different from what we've been doing for a long time, but it makes it easier to explain it to other people. And actually, I think that's pretty important. As I said, there is an urgent need to rapidly improve climate change education. And another, I think, powerful way to help get the message across is to have people actually ask the teenagers in their life if they've received the climate change education they want and deserve. And almost universally, you're going to hear no, that they have not. We all know on this call, of course, that most teachers have little or no preparation to teach climate change. And climate change is here and now and negatively affecting nearly everywhere. So we've been at PRI have already been producing high quality educational materials for teaching and learning about climate change for a long time. The four of us in the PRI's core climate team have been working together for over a decade on this stuff. We do professional development. We offer a range of public programs in person and online. We produce museum, nature center, and online exhibits. We serve the climate change education community. A couple examples of that is that I'm on the CLEAN board. Ingrid is on the subject climate board. And we're working to improve policy related to climate change education. It also simplifies our introductions. Many of you who are regulars here have heard me introduce myself many times as Don Haas from the Paleontological Research Institution, its Museum of the Earth, and its Cayuga Nature Center. It is far easier to say I'm Don Haas from the Center for Climate Change Education at PRI. And while that's kind of silly, it's also, I think, kind of important. We're already a national leader in climate and energy education. And the paleontological piece often confuses folks a little bit. What does paleontology have to do with climate change? Well, understanding Earth history can be a valuable part of understanding climate change. And my sort of go-to fact nugget on that is that for 90% of Earth history, there was essentially no fire because all the fuel was underwater and there wasn't enough oxygen in the atmosphere. And now we humans are changing climate by burning stuff. So that is in part an answer to the people who say, well, climate has changed through all of Earth history. Well, yes, it has, and paleontology has helped us to understand that. And we are now changing it by human-induced or human-created or human-managed fire. And for 90% of Earth history, there wasn't any fire. So who we are, there's our core climate team, 4 of us who are employed by PRI, and we've expanded that group and are probably expanding it further by working with other folks who are not employed by PRI, but working with us. So Toby Alt is a climate scientist at Cornell. Ben Luce is a photovoltaic scientist and chair of the board of directors of the American Solar Energy Society. Ben Brown Steiner is his day job right now is an NSF program officer, and program officers get to spend a day a week working on research or outreach, and he is working with us on that. And Frank Tellis is a PhD student at Northern Arizona University who's working on several projects with Toby and with us. And there are more folks that we'll be adding to that bonus list. So what we do very quickly, we do educator professional development, both online and in person. There's a couple of things related to some past programming, some stuff that's coming up, and actually we're going to change the date on this, and I'll put out an announcement on that on the CLEAN list when we figure out when that date. It'll be sometime in November though. So just an overview of the center. At the State Science Teachers Conference on November 4th, we'll be doing a half-day institute on fire, climate change, and the science of energy. A couple of past things. We've done a number of author events with Marianne Krasny, If You Can't Beat Them, Eat Them, about her book In This Together to Combat the Climate Crisis, or Connecting with Your Communities. And I've done online sessions on my 2x4, which some of you have seen me talk about. We had James Balog with us for Earth Day back in 2022. And we publish for both researchers and practitioners. So there's our teacher-friendly guide to climate change and our book on the Marcellus Shale and hydrofracking and some other stuff there, including our YouTube channel and our Earth at Home website. We publish a newsletter 5 times a year. September issue came out about 3 weeks ago, I think. I'll put a link to that in the chat. We have a substantial YouTube channel with lots of climate education videos on it. We develop exhibits at the Museum of the Earth, the Cayuga Nature Center, and online. And in the past, we've done some traveling exhibits as well. We work with others in the climate change education community. I was on the panel that wrote the NSTA position statement on teaching climate science, which is about to be, which has been updated, and that'll be released, I think, sometime in the next few weeks. We do public programming, like all of those things. We had an interesting concert at the Museum of the Earth, and Sonic Vortex is actually led by Ben Luce, who, as I mentioned, is the chairman of the board of the American Solar Energy Society. He is also a very talented musician and does, his band does concerts that infuse science into the performance in interesting ways. We run Science in the Virtual Pub, which is very often about climate change related issues. And there's stuff on that. And what time is it? I think we can watch this minute-long trailer for our newest video series, although I forgot to click sharing sound, so I might need to stop sharing for a minute. We'll see how it works, if it actually loads. See if it loads. Take a sip of water while I wait. There we go.
There we go. Looks like something's happening.
Yes, yes. So this is Toby Alt, who is one of our sort of bonus members of our climate team. My computer is ancient and slow. all the time. Perhaps this won't work. Put the chat. I'll put the link in the chat and you can watch it on your own later if I can move you out of the way. But maybe it's coming. Should get you there. I don't think it's going to cooperate. So let's go back to the slideshow here. The joys of ancient computers. Cut it out. Oh, come on. That is most of the slides, but we're not all the way there yet. Okay, so how are we funded? Well, oops, too quick there. So our work is funded by grants from the National Science Foundation, from NOAA, from the Park Foundation, and a substantial endowment from an anonymous bequest of about $1 million to PRI, specifically for climate change education, and as well as by generous donations of hundreds of private supporters, people just like you. That I think is the end. Yeah, that's the end of the slideshow. So I will stop sharing and take any questions. Ingrid is here too, so she can come in the conversation. Frank, I see sounds coming.
Yeah, Don. This is such an exciting thing. I mean, I've been on the journey with you from probably the beginning,
Yep.
if not near it. And I love the reframe and the focus 100%. One of the things I'm noticing across the country is there's more institutional focus here.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, in the past, the CLEAN network was kind of where we had the conversations with, you know, like more of the program leads. But, you know, that isn't, it feels like we have a new need to convene, but with a different group of people that like, you know, the Tuesday at 1 o'clock Eastern probably doesn't work for a lot of those people. And, you know, I'm thinking of like, you know, Yoka from Clio or Caroline Lewis, who always kicks me in the ass and well earned. But, you know, there's so many other organizations that don't show up at the 1 o'clock Eastern time Tuesday call. But I do wonder if aligning these efforts in a more intentional, valuable way as you move out and call your initiatives, you know, there are places where you could do them together with a Communitopia out of Pittsburgh or a Climate Generation out of, you know, St. Paul, and the list goes on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Kelly Lee from Eclipse at UCI doesn't show up here often, but I think there's, you know, there's probably a purpose for some kind of like institutional convening for sharing agendas and priorities and initiatives. Would that be valuable to you as you move out and expand this new center, which is so exciting?
Yes, and we're working to bring entities in New York State together around. Right. You know, the catalyst for it is the working with the National Wildlife Federation and their CRET project, the Climate and Resilience Education Task Force, which is folks from across New York State who are working on climate change education and climate change education policy. And I think we're going to make a difference. And so we're scheming the best way to get people together across New York State, but, you know, across the country. Right. Landscape of climate change education is changing very rapidly, and new institutions getting involved all the time, and trying to figure out who's doing what and how to best coordinate those is I think really important. And I think it would be great if we could figure out how to move fairly quickly on that.
Thank you. It's a super exciting opportunity. And I'm also thinking I know we've been threatening to publish that paper of the CLEAN network analysis, but it clearly shows a lot of people don't know about each other. And there's a lot of new players coming into the space, but we don't have just like in CLEAN, we've never shared, we don't know who's in CLEAN.
Right.
You just if people respond, they're there. But there's a lot of people that lurk and you hear about them periodically. But, we could actually do more intentional work if we actually knew a little bit more about each other.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Scott?
So what, as you're talking with Frank about some possibilities, how do you see, given this name and possible reorganization, how's that different than what you did before? And I mean, where do you see this going since you're making this change?
Yeah, and like I said, it's not a huge difference from what we've been doing over the last well more than a decade. We've been doing climate change related things since before I started working at PRI, which I started working full time at PRI in 2008, I believe, so 16 years. And that whole time, climate change has been part of my gig, and it's been a growing piece. So this is sort of, signaling an evolution where we've been working on climate change education, and that's been a growing piece of what we've been up to for a long time. But it's not clear to people outside of the climate change education community, and not always that clear to people around New York State where we're based. So it's really largely highlighting the fact that we're doing this work, and by highlighting it, we expect to continue to ramp it up. I would say we've been year after year for at least 20 years, we've been doing increasingly more climate change education related work. And Ingrid, do you want to chime in with anything on that?
I think so. I think you've covered it. Yeah.
That last link I put in the chat, by the way, is the September issue of our newsletter. The newsletter comes out 5 times a year, that roughly line up with the beginning of the school marking periods in New York State, come out a week or so after the start of the marking periods, and then a summer issue for number 5. So that's our September issue, which has an announcement about the Center for one thing, as well as other programming we have coming up and other resources.
What do you, Dawn and Ingrid, what are you most excited for with this new center?
Well, I think I'm most excited that it makes it more clear that we're doing this work to more people. So I think that will, help us continue to do the work. I hope it will be a piece of what sparks additional funding for us to expand the work, and I think that's the heart of my excitement. What about you, Ingrid?
Yeah, I agree. I was going to say the same thing, and I feel like it seems like it might be trivial to explain who we are and what we do, but it really does make a difference. So, for example, even here in Ithaca, a small city, we have people who still don't know we exist as an institution, who don't even know our Natural History Museum exists, which is a place a lot of people come who just for fun, entertainment, a place to go when it's raining. Not that they're all, so motivated by learning about natural history, and yet there's so many people who still don't know about it. So I think that's just our museum. But again, if they know about us, they think of us maybe as Don said, paleontologists, the dinosaur museum. They don't associate us necessarily with climate change or climate change education. So this is a way to get that out there, to explain what we do without having to explain what we do.
Right. Yes. Katie's got a hand up.
Yeah, I was just curious. So, and maybe you described this and I missed it, but you know, this is really exciting. Like, I'm super excited for you guys and thanks for presenting about this. It's really cool, and I really agree. I'm glad that you're trying to better align your work with sort of how you're described. And I'm just curious. So, you know, you're changing to sort of a center for, and it seems like a really big, yeah, name and branding and that kind of change for you, and that's great. When series changed, we changed from education and outreach group within series to a center for education and engagement and evaluation, and again similar, just fit our group better in what we were doing, and it didn't change a lot in terms of like funding or kind of how we work as a group, but it did technically, we became a center at the university. So it's just a little bit different hierarchically how we kind of fit into the structure of everything. I'm just curious if this is kind of mostly like that cosmetic, not cos, I don't want to downplay it because it's still really exciting for you all, but I'm just curious, does this change any amount of kind of like how you're housed or what type of work you're doing to be more of a center? Or is that more of just within the name change, another sort of branding change that you're doing, that it's just changing kind of the nature of how you're putting yourself out there? Does that make sense as a question?
Yeah, and I think I think it's mostly a rebranding, mostly, and the Paleontological Research Institution is still the parent organization of us, and still doing paleontological research. We have one of the largest fossil collections in North America, about 7 million specimens in our collections, and we do have paleontological researchers working with that. And we have a natural history museum, and we have a nature center. So all of that continues to go on, but we are drawing more attention to the climate change education work within the institution, which connects to all of that other stuff in ways that I think I said. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, thanks. That's helpful. Yeah, so similar to us. I mean, I think we are still, housed under series technically, but it was kind of exciting to kind of like change a little bit of how we were seen at the university, if that makes sense. I think similar here where you can, like you said, market yourselves a little bit differently, but yeah, it doesn't change where you're housed and kind of all that. Yeah.
See if the video might work. Let me try screen sharing again for her video here. It's not going to cooperate. So take a look at that video after we're done.
Thanks for trying again.
Yeah, and as I said, if you want to help with our funding, somebody could send me a new computer.
There you go. Thanks for sharing all the links in the chat here, and not to cut off any discussion, but I wonder if we could take these few minutes to maybe look through some of that and then regroup if we have other meetings at the top of the hour. I would like to watch the video, so I'll probably do that.
Yeah, well, if somebody with a faster computer than mine clicks on that link and wants to share it, we could see the video.
That's
it's
a very good idea, Don.
Every now and then I have.
Yeah, I got it.
And it's just sort of a goofy trailer for the video series, but the video series itself is some really great lectures for teachers and students. Think about climate change through Earth's history.
You guys can see my screen share, right? Okay.
But we're not hearing it. I think there's sound already, isn't there? Yeah, I think you need to stop sharing and click the share sound button.
Oops. What was that, Don?
We're not hearing it, so I think you need to
Oh, geez.
stop sharing and restart, but click the share sound button.
Share sound. Thank you. Good point. All right, because this is good music. We want to hear it.
So there you go. But it's I think there are 6 episodes out now. Is that right, Ingrid?
Yeah.
And they're I think range from 10 to 20 minutes long, but with each one about a specific piece of climate science. And it's really lectures from his sort of general climate science course at Cornell, Introduction to Climate Science.
It's very Jurassic Park-esque, the music. Or Night at the Museum-esque, I guess. But fun. Great. Anything else?
Put in the link to our YouTube channel too. There you go.
I'm working on sending out a newsletter next week or the week following to the Clean listserv. So I will try to include some of this in that as well.
Yeah, and you can also put in a link to the press release, which I'll put in the chat as well.
Oh, perfect.
Where you can base what you write on the press release, whatever you want to do.
Perfect.
Computer stone. That's the press release.
Thank you.
Thank
Great. Well, thanks everyone for joining, and yes, if anyone has anything that they ever want included in the newsletter, just send it to me. I do tend to pull stuff from the listserv. I try to, if the timing works out, I try to pull whatever is shared on the listserv into the newsletter. We usually send out the network newsletter either like the second to last week or the last week of the month. So if you share things closer to the beginning of the month, they'll be more likely to be included. But I am also direct path to the newsletter. So yeah. Thanks everyone for sharing, and have a great rest of your day. We'll see you next week.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.